see this. I'm not that good yet.
Go, but all right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Alex Renneman from Unleashed Tiger, and I'm here with Natalie Tennant, who's running for Secretary of State's office here in West Virginia. Natalie, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on here and to have a good conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Just for all, if you're wondering, if the first time you're tuning in or watching one of our videos, Unleashed Tiger, we are a nonprofit based in North Central West Virginia out of Grafton. And our goal, we have 6 pillars, but one of our main pillars is about governance and transparency of our leadership, and transparency balanced with accountability. And so this is an initiative we created. I think back in the 2008 election was the first time we did this, where we interview candidates both locally, regionally, and on the statewide level. And so in this year, you've asked us for years over time. In this year is the first year we actually did panels where we had folks on it. So some of the other offices you've seen where we've had both candidates. In this case, we did reach out to Mac Warner's campaign, and they declined to come on tonight. So we do have Natalie. We thank you for joining us. And all the questions are called from locals who have interest and put those things together. We'll also open it up. If you're watching us live now and you have a question you'd like to ask Natalie, please throw it in the chat and we'll try to get that to her. If you're watching this recorded, well, the one thing I say to all people, all candidates, when you ask them, what do you want from the public? We want their input. Let me know. So if you're watching this later and you've got questions for Natalie, reach out to her. I'm sure she'd be happy to have your question or your comment to her. All right, so Natalie, let's get started with this thing. Just right off the bat, and I like to open up with this question, and I'm not making light of what COVID-19 has brought to us in terms of challenges in our world. That said, you look at different parts of our lives, it's created some opportunities for us to maybe rekindle certain hobbies or relationships or whatever. So what's something maybe you've learned or a hobby you've picked up or something you've been able to do basically because COVID changed our lives?
Wow. I guess I've been able to campaign. Like I'm only one mode right now. I got my daughter to college back in August, and we've been taking turns taking care of my dad. He's 92. He had a fall on his birthday. So if my daughter's okay and my dad's okay, then I'm focusing one thing on, and it's selfish. And this is where, there is sacrifice and there is selfishness when you run for office. And especially with only a couple days until the election, I have been so focused on the campaign. So when you say, what did I learn from COVID? What new thing? Here's the one thing that I'm so impressed with is that people around the state, all ages, all walks of life, all parties have become and embraced Zoom because we've had to. We've had my dad on it before. So here's what I'm going to do with it moving forward from what I've done in the Secretary of State's office. You didn't ask this, but I'm telling you, here's what I think that we can do, because I have had these questions like, from Zoom, what would you do in the Secretary of State's office? Well, you all know that I'm an innovator. I streamlined the office, I modernized the office, and I always looked for what ways we could help out. You kind of focus on businesses because they're the ones doing the interaction so much. So I started an online chat. This was about 2011 or 12 because we were recognized nationally for this innovation. So I started online chat, it wasn't like we invented this. Businesses do this all the time. So a customer can come on, ask a question, and they get a representative. And so we started that in the Secretary of State's office. We first did it in the business division, and then in the elections division, and then all across the divisions in the office. So we did an online chat. And what I felt was small businesses don't come with, a bunch of lawyers or a bunch of accountants. They're basically doing the work themselves. So if you're working on a product over here, but you have a question, you could go ask the question online chat, come back and work over here, go back to what the answer was. So that was very successful, recognized nationally. Unfortunately, I don't think the current administration is using it now. That would be a great question to ask if they were here. Anyway, I know we can do it. We've done it before. The next step for me is incorporate Zoom, whatever platform someone's using. Zoom has become the easiest for me. Google Meetup, I guess, is pretty easy. But if someone but if a business owner had a question and they weren't able to come and the office wouldn't be open, they could say, Missy from the office, can you set up an online, not an online chat, but online Zoom? And she would say, yes, we have you scheduled for 11:45. Here's your link. I mean, that's what we are going to become. Not that we want to necessarily, but it's just an extension of good customer service, I believe, because it is so much more interesting seeing you in person. Like while I'm trying to look at the camera and make sure I'm talking to you, but I can see you over here and get your reaction at the same time. And I think that that's an advantage that we've had because of COVID. The other advantage is, and I think people will use it even more, is there is you can go from one meeting to another with they're attending to the Parkersburg Chamber of Commerce, Mid-Ohio Valley Chamber of Commerce, and they said they've gotten more interaction because people can just go from their office to here to Zoom, and so that's a plus. And we have to look for the positive things that are happening because of this pandemic that we're in.
Yeah, for sure. And all of those components they were ready for prime time maybe, but COVID has really load tested all of these video chat apps and all the video conferencing and all these things. So the infrastructure should be there. So I agree with you. I think it's interesting. Let's take a step back, and because I think everybody has their own perspective of what the Secretary of State does or what a certain office does in the state. So let's go way back and just kind of help people understand what is, tell us about the office from your perspective, its roles. I mean, you've served in this office, so you have a unique perspective, I think, than some other candidates potentially that would be running in this office in other races. And so what are the priorities for our state, and why are you the right one for us to put into office potentially from your perspective?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you tapped the brakes for me, because I start out, I'm at chapter 14 and everybody's still at one, like, wait a minute, what the heck is she talking about? What does the Secretary of State's office really do? So that's why I talk business. The biggest division in the Secretary of State's office is the business and licensing division. And I tell folks, this office touches you and touches parts of your life that you don't even realize it does. So it helps you to I hate using these terms, run more efficiently, but it helps you to be able to interact maybe a little better. So the biggest division is business and licensing. If you want to start a business, a limited liability company, PLLC, you go through the Secretary of State's office. Sole proprietorship is still in the tax department, but some advances have been made there. We've helped make those advances with the tax department. But if you want to start a business, that's where you go to the Secretary of State's office. And that's why I think it's so important to streamline, make it easier, and be able to interact. Also in the Secretary of State's office, that licensure or registration part, we register charities. The Secretary of State's office registers notaries. That's the important part that I don't think people realize, that's the part that really impacts your life, with buying a car, buying a house, anything that needs notarized. That person is registered in the Secretary of State's office. Marriage celebrants are registered in the Secretary of State's office. Sports agents are registered in the Secretary of State's office. We have about 40 of those in West Virginia, if you can believe it. And then like private investigators too. So that's the business and licensing division. The division that folks mainly focus on right now is the elections division. The Secretary of State is the chief election official. And so you oversee kind of the process. And I have a feeling we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about COVID election 2020 and really what kind of impact the Secretary of State could make, both positive and negative, on this election. And we've seen both. So we'll talk about that. So that's the election takes place in a county, and a county clerk runs that election. You vote in that county, the ballots are counted there, but the Secretary of State has the more uniform and oversee of the election. And then the secretary part of the office, Secretary of State, the secretary to state government, is in filing proclamations and documents. And a very important role is when a state agency has a meeting, the public is allowed to be there. So they have to file open meeting notice. They have to file their agenda and when they're going to meet with the Secretary of State's office. And that's about the openness. You talked about transparency in government. That's why that's so important. And there are reporters who heavily rely on obviously the Open Meetings Act, but what's it called on the website? Meeting notices, I guess, governmental meeting notices. So that's kind of like the three major areas of the Secretary of State's office.
Perfect. Well, let's dig into the one that's near and dear to all of us right now. We're a week out of the election, and I want to talk about election integrity. You know, President Trump's tweeted some things, even called out West Virginia in the first debate, if you can call it a debate, about fraud, and I mean I think it's really tough for the average citizen to understand how secure or insecure our elections are. So can you help us understand how much fraud we should really be concerned about with elections, and if so, where it's most likely to occur, and what measures maybe you either took when you were Secretary of State, or what you would plan to take in the future to increase election integrity, or the perception of election integrity if there's really not that much of an issue.
All right, so there's a lot in there, and so if I miss a question, you ask it again. I think first and foremost, for a leader, leadership is about consistency, and so consistency comes in many forms, by how maybe you construct policy, but also in the messaging too. And my concern is there's been a lot of mixed messages, whether it's from the president, who says, don't trust mail-in ballots, but I'm going to go vote. I'm going to send mine in anyway, which he did in the primary. And then he went and voted in person just a couple of days ago. The same holds true for the current Secretary of State. Don't tell people and say, yes, absentee balloting is available, but go in person because we don't trust it. I mean, that's not leadership, and that's not a consistent message. And that hurts integrity of an election, because misinformation is voter suppression. Confusion is voter suppression. And, there's real barriers that's voter suppression too. And so that's why the consistency of this. So, first and foremost, we just need to tell folks absentee balloting and absentee voting is safe. We know that. We know that from the 5 states that are really that have been doing it for years. And we know that there are several layers of security when it comes to absentee balloting, when it comes to asking for a ballot, requesting a ballot, when it comes to the county clerk looking at the information and knowing people in his or her county. So we know we've seen the levels of security, and we've seen how they work. So absentee ballots are safe, and they are so needed in this uncertain time. And let me make sure I'm getting all your questions. Like it is so important. This is also how you can instill confidence for the voter and integrity in an election, is staying consistent as you can. And it's hard to stay consistent in this COVID time because, we've had to move the primary election. We saw that. We will not be moving the general election because that takes a constitutional amendment. That takes an act of Congress. So that's not going to move on Tuesday. But the consistency part is, from the primary election, all registered voters were sent an absentee ballot application. And they utilized that. 260,000 people requested, 224 voted them. Those other ones, you say, oh, well, they didn't use those, but no, they could have gone in. They still could have taken it in or decided to vote in person. So the consistency needs to remain, especially in such difficult times. Well, then comes the general election. And here's the part where the Secretary of State is the chief election official. He decides that, no, we're going to pull the rug out from underneath the voters, and we're not sending the applications. Can I tell you something, that it is October 27th, and there are still people in West Virginia who think that they're getting an application to be able to ask for a ballot? That is a darn dirty shame. That is a barrier. That is voter suppression, because you've changed it up on a voter. And so, by the way, the 28th is the last day to request it, and that's even cutting it short already. So consistency in the election, and that's why it was so bad. And we thought this might happen. We have fewer people who have requested an absentee ballot than in the primary. And there's no way that should happen, because general elections tend to have a higher turnout. And we already know that we're breaking records. Before I started this Zoom or this live, what are we calling this? This live Facebook. I just know it is. I got the list of the numbers from today and like where we are, and we are going to shatter the record of 2016 and probably any other presidential year, just because of the COVID and because of the environment in which we are.
Yeah,
So
I've seen that
that's
across other states too. Yeah, it's
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. And so you also ask, or you can follow up and I'll
Yeah, I was
answer.
just yeah, so I was just going to say, so if mail-in voting, if absentee voting is safe and is not as prone to fraud as maybe some, depending on what media you're consuming, might lead folks to believe, or just
Right.
maybe conspiracies in our own mind have concerns. Where should we, there's disenfranchisement, there's talks about that. So what challenges do we really have? And as a Secretary of State, if you're fortunate enough to be elected into that office, what are things you think we should be focused on in West Virginia, whether it be about disenfranchisement or voter fraud or those things? Where are concerns?
Yeah, to go on to that, I'll get to that. But to go on to that, I mean, another example is we had an early voting site shut down in Nitro in Kanawha County because a poll worker tested positive. So, I look at that and say, we all thought that something like that could happen. And that's why we should have made sure we sent out applications earlier. We're $100,000 voters fewer asking than we were in the primary election. So when we move forward from here now, let me tell you about my record right now, so I can tell you then what needs to be done next based on the experience that I've had. My record, and this is what helps to thwart anyone who would try to chip away at democracy or try to steal an election. First off, I put in advances for elections that give confidence, give accessibility, and break down those barriers. And I'm proud to say that I'm the Secretary of State that brought the most advances for voter registration. Like, that's the foundation that gets you in the door. We had online voter registration 5 years ago. It's been implemented. We're using it like heck now because everything's online. Second, I worked with Republicans and Democrats to pass automatic voter registration, which is really like automated. Um, we passed that in 2016. We were the third state in the country to pass it. It still has not been implemented because this current secretary keeps asking for delays, and then he blames those delays on the legislature, saying, "Oh, well, they passed that and they gave us this time." That doesn't work that way. That's not the way that it really happened. It sounds like it's like that's, oh yeah, that makes sense. No, that's not the way it was. We shouldn't even be talking about automatic voter registration because we should have had it for the last 3 years. And what it is, it's just an opt out instead of opt in. When you go now, you are asked, do you want to register to vote? Automated says the information that you've provided will be used to register to vote unless you decline. No one has to ever get registered to vote. So that's just the difference there. And that's about automation and using what's in place. So I helped to put to get that passed. I have put in place the Electronic Registration Information Center, which allows states, if they become part of it, then they can cross-check each other's information on your database or check it against vital statistics or the national change of address with a post office. So that's a sense of security because you know who's on the rolls, who should be on the rolls are the ones who are on the rolls and not somebody else who may have moved, who may have passed away. And so I put that in place. And you hear a lot about it now. It's interesting. And this is what gets frustrating sometimes. My opponent takes credit for it. And it's like, I put it in place and you criticized it 4 years ago. Now you like it, but that's okay. As long as it makes elections stronger, which is what it does. So those are things that you put in place for the integrity and the confidence of an election. Now, what I did as Secretary of State also, like, I didn't take any guff. I didn't take any, if someone was trying to manipulate, steal an election, I had more investigations and more convictions than any other Secretary of State because I didn't take it. I didn't back off of it. That was the case back in 2010, 2012. So I take that very seriously. And when you have that consistency, here we talk about consistency again, that you know that that's what's going to take place, then that helps to make sure that you have voter confidence in place. And I just use advances that we have that are available to to us and to the state. Like I told you that we should not be talking about automatic voter registration. It should be in place. What we should be talking about is what you'll do next. And this is what I talk about. And this is why I'm running again for Secretary of State, because I just think he's set stagnant and stale and haven't moved forward. I mean, a good example is automatic voter registration. Here's what we should be talking about to make sure that elections are secure, or not just secure, but confidence. And one of them is risk limiting audit. And that is this is statistical usage to make sure that the results are the way that they've been reported. Now, there are states around the country, there are smaller counties, there are cities that are doing pilot projects with risk limiting audits. I haven't heard the current Secretary of State say anything about forward thinking like this. Do I know if it's going to work in West Virginia? No. Do I know that we should say no to it? Heck no, we should never say no. I mean, Alex, you're an innovator too. Like if every time you saw something and you automatically said no because one person said, no, I don't want to do that, you're missing out on a whole lot, right? I mean, that's what entrepreneurs are. And that's what I take an entrepreneurial spirit to the Secretary of State's office and say, it's hard to tell people, oh, we're going to try this out in state government, because then they think that you're not being serious about it. But you as an entrepreneur, you see where I'm coming from.
Sure.
That it's not really a risk. It could be calculated risk maybe, and you have to make it more calculated in government than you might from your own business. So that's what I would be looking forward to. I would look at advances in elections with maybe ranked choice voting. There's a lot of talk about that. There's been a lot of movement. Maine is going to be the first state to have ranked choice voting in a presidential election. Will that work in West Virginia? I don't know. But why should I tell the people of West Virginia, no, you go sit down. We don't think it'll work, so we're not even going to try. That infuriates me more than anything. And that's what I've seen out of this Secretary of State, because I've heard him say that. He's like, oh, the Secretary of State of Maine, he doesn't like ranked choice voting. I'm really good friends with the Secretary of State of Maine. I don't care if he likes it or not. The people voted for it. The people wanted it. And that's what it's like. So don't shut it down because one person you heard didn't like it. Oh, that infuriates me. So go ahead. Sorry, or I could keep talking about that.
No, that's good. I mean, there's so much talk about election integrity. It was really important. I wanted to cover that first. And you mentioned the kind of the three legs, if you will, of this office, but a second really a huge leg of that is business formations and licensing and those things. So let me dig into that a bit. What have you done, previously, or maybe more importantly, what do you plan to do to help facilitate business creation and ease of filing and maintaining status for businesses in West Virginia?
Yep, that's a really good question, and I like that. And I like it that you understand that it's not just one thing. It's not one thing that you're going to change and be like, oh, we're going to get all kind of businesses. It has to be the whole combination. And I think, and people might think, oh, this sounds soft, or but it's an attitude. It's an attitude of we are going to do what we can to help businesses. And what does that really mean? Well, first of all, a welcoming environment, like when I talked about an entrepreneurial spirit, that's what I brought to the Secretary of State's office, I guess 2009. That would be 11 years ago, almost 12 years ago. And I even said to the employees, I said, we're going to be the best Secretary of State's office in the state. I didn't really know what that looked like or how we might get that. But if you have that attitude, for one, and I told them, I will never ask you to do something unethical, immoral, unethical, or illegal, knowingly do that. And then the other thing was, I will cultivate you. I will help you grow in where you are. So that was one, the mindset that they would have in the office. And I think that you also have to have a mindset that you're also showing other people, which when I say this, it's like outwardly, no one would know this unless I say, I'm the first and maybe still the only statewide elected official who implemented non-discrimination policy in the Secretary of State's office. Like the employees had to sign this so they understood, based on the ENDA, that's what I meant by it. So that's a welcoming, and that would be welcoming to businesses when they know, oh, Well, here's a Secretary of State. We didn't have it for the whole state, but now, the Supreme Court has passed it. So that's one way. The next, so that type of environment. The next thing is I worked really hard to streamline the office. When I got into the Secretary of State's office, only 11% of businesses and charities were filing their annual reports online. So only 11% of about 97,000, now maybe 100,000 or so. So what did that mean? That meant that we were getting stacks and stacks and stacks of annual reports. And I go in there and they're like, oh yeah, we have to give stacks, like so-and-so in elections is going to get 100 stacks and they're responsible for implementing these by the next 2 days. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Elections isn't business people. They're not the business division. So they had to be passed around. And I even tried to do it, but I had so much other stuff. Like the deputy secretaries were even inputting these. It's like, wait a minute, this is not right. So we kept pushing forward and saying businesses go online, and then we would streamline by, instead of sending a whole piece of paper in an envelope, we would send an update in a postcard. That saved money. So then by the time I left, it switched around. Like 90% of the businesses were filing online. So I wasn't seeing these stacks of papers everywhere. What I did, I listened to businesses. So I was like, businesses, go online, file online. They were like, this is great, Natalie. And it was a business owner in Jefferson County. And he said, this is great. You're having us file online, but you're charging us a transaction fee. And I was a little embarrassed when I didn't fully have that. I was like, yes, we are. He's like, that's not right. So you're paying your annual fee in addition to the transaction fee. So I go back and I look at this and I was like, I do not want us to go back to papers. And I looked at it and I said, my rate on return is still better by not having to either offer overtime or have other people do other jobs. We will absorb that transaction fee. So I took it off. So that's what efficiency does. I took that off. So I think that shows businesses, again, the environment, we're not going to nickel and dime you. And another reason I'm running for Secretary of State is to go back in there and take it off because it's been put on. And you probably didn't even know that. It is a small fee, but it's the principle of it too. That just makes me angry that you snuck it back on and you say you're using it for technology, yet here's something that you didn't finish. And here's the thing I'm going to do next. When you say, what did you do, Natalie? What are you going to do next? Here's the thing that I'm going to do next. In 2015, I worked with Republicans and Democrats to pass a bill that would establish and cause the Secretary of State to establish an electronic online business portal, which it required to bring in 4 agencies: Secretary of State, Tax, Workforce, and Labor, all online in a portal where someone starting a business could just go on and get all that information there. Well, that was 2015. Do you guys think that we have it now? There's this guise that, we have an online portal, but when you click onto it to try to get to those other 3 agencies, it says coming soon. That has frustrated me so much because we set the blueprint in place. We made a task force, established a task force of all the of representatives from all the agencies, and it hasn't been done. It still says coming soon. But I'll tell you that he touts a building all under one roof. It's not even functioning, working properly, because I've talked to other entrepreneurs who are like, I went in there to try to get a question answered by tax, and it's not answered. I truly believe that is a misuse of funds. No matter where the money's coming from, it should have been used to get the online portal truly in place and truly train employees, and it's not being done. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to go back and dig out my blueprints and get that in place. So that's another way. Like, why should I make someone from Louisville, Kentucky, or tell me some of the places why should someone from Grafton have to drive down to Charleston? Why should someone who's looking and thinking, oh, can I do something in West Virginia if I'm in an outside state? So that's another thing that I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's certainly, and in 2020, we need to be able to have that capacity for sure. Let me transition away to give you a chance. And again, I had a question for Mac as well in this regard, but your campaigns have had a couple barbs at each other, and one of them too. And I'm going to give you a chance to address it clearly to the crowd, which is this concept or this caricature of you're using this office as a stepping stone to other offices and things. I know you've heard that out there. I want to give you a chance to address that with voters who are listening now and maybe undecided, and say, what is Natalie about? What are your goals?
Is that really an issue? I mean, I know he's made it an issue because I sit and look, and here's the way that I address it, and this is what gets me, because I was asked this on statewide radio too, and I was like, why why is it okay for him to run for three offices? No one ever thinks about that or says anything, but not me. And it's like, is this a woman thing? I was the mountaineer. I don't really play the women's card that much or at all. But I did point this out. I'm like, it's 2020. Women can run for office. Did anybody ask Joe Manchin this question? He's run for 5 different offices. Did anybody ask Senator Capito this question when she immediately, gets reelected to Congress and goes and starts running for Senate? I mean, it's like, come on, folks. I have shown my dedication to the state of West Virginia. And in my 8 years as Secretary of State, look at the advances that I've made. And imagine the advances if we had this same attitude, not a stale and stagnant attitude of no, we can't do it. Like, we need this openness that we're willing to take. So when somebody says that, anybody can say you're using any office as a stepping stone. I mean, the Joe Manchin would still be a member of the House of Delegates. Am I right?
That's where he started.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Let me ask you this. Now, you've mentioned several initiatives that you think are vital or important or part of what you would bring if you were elected as the next Secretary of State. Let me ask you to boil it down. Let's go up to that 30,000-foot view. What's one outcome that if you win and we sit down here again, and we're fortunate enough to sit down again here in 4 years, and voters are looking to say, okay, we put Natalie in there. What's the one outcome that you can point to? Again, there's a lot of things, but what would you want to point is this is the litmus test. We were able to do this, not just we tried this, we wanted to do this, but what's something you would have liked to have accomplished at the end of your 4-year term if you're elected?
Um, First off, if I'm elected, I hope I see you sooner than 4 years. I'm willing to come on here.
Perfect.
If you want to come on once a month or, once every 3 months. Yeah, that first month might be a little tough.
Yeah, we'll give you a little time.
I mean, I know what you're trying to do and saying, what's the one thing? Like, I'm so proud of, just take a step back and look at my 8 years. The one thing in each division, what would I say that we accomplished? So, I mean, and because people say, what's the first thing you're going to do? There are several things that need to be done right off the bat. I'd like to get that transaction fee taken off. I now look at it. I won't be in office January 1st when the new filing period starts. So I can't say that I can remove it then unless we retroactively reimburse those businesses, which if you reimburse them, it's like $45 to reimburse a business, cost the state of West Virginia that. So, there are other ways to save money. I mean, I'm tight with money, you guys. I grew up on a farm here in North Central West Virginia, youngest of 7. So you want to talk about being tight with money. I carry that with me wherever I go. So that would be one of the first things. You're trying to give me one full initiative. One thing that I've been talking about around the state these last couple of weeks is building off of an initiative that I worked with Republicans and Democrats on, which was the Veterans Business Waiver, that in 2015, we started this. If a veteran wanted to start a business, we waived the startup fee and then the annual report fee for the next 4 years. And so that's a potential saving of more than $200. And so that first year, 450 veterans used it. And so now hundreds and hundreds have used it. And so I'm looking at this, knowing how successful it was, seeing veterans all the time saying, oh yeah, I use that. Okay. We should be extending that to the military spouses. Military spouses have a staggering unemployment rate across the nation of 24%. So we should extend that to the spouses, that if they wanted to start a business, their fee would be waived. And so would the next. So I believe, and I'm a military spouse, so I understand this. I'm not in the same situation of having my husband have a permanent change station from place to place to place. When he's been deployed big areas, he's gone to Afghanistan. The family's not going to Afghanistan with him. So I could venture to say, because I've promised to make that one of the first, that can't be the only piece of legislation that I introduce or have introduced in February. So that's going to be an accomplishment. Can we do it instead of 4 years? Can we just do it like the first year?
Sure. Have at it.
Like, can I tell you something? Just from my experience, there are going to be things that I accomplish in the Secretary of State's office that I don't even know that's there yet. But if you have that attitude of we're going to embrace it, then then you're going to accomplish it. I mean, online voter registration. Did I think about that when we got it? I've been thinking about it since 2010 and 11, trying to get it passed. Did I think about it in 2008 when I was running for office? Maybe not necessarily. Actually, Arizona was the first one I think that implemented it in 2008. So no, like there are things that are going to happen that I don't know yet, but I know that we're going to be able to accomplish it. So let's go first year. I believe that we could get that military expansion to the military spouses accomplished. And so that would be a first month thing. Second, this legislative session is going to be very important for election administration, because during this COVID election, a lot of our election laws and code have been modified, because under a state of emergency, you can use emergency rules, and some of those things have been changed. And so there are going to be, we have the ability to vote absentee without an excuse, really. And there are many states that have that. We've contemplated that before. I believe that that's going to be a piece of legislation. If we don't go full vote by mail, we are going to have absentee, no excuse absentee voting. I just foresee that. So that's going to be another piece of legislation that will be contemplated, and especially coming out of an emergency situation, a state of emergency. That's what I'll say. That's what we're in. You have to make sure that the legislature is that the laws are still what the legislature intended. Because when you have a state of emergency and you have emergency rules and emergency changes, there's a tendency for that to become commonplace. Yeah, even though that's not what the code indicated when the legislature passed it. Does that make sense? I really got into the weeds there a minute. Okay.
Does, yeah.
So the next thing is I'll finish the job of automatic voter registration. It will be implemented. I mean, isn't that a sad story? I get back in the Secretary of State's office. I helped to make us the 3rd state in the country, and now we'll be like the 25th or something. That's what I come with to Alex. It's like, West Virginia, you are allowed to expect more. And I think sometimes just because the way we were raised. I mean, I was raised like that. It's like, if you want something, you have to save for it, make it yourself, or do without. There were sometimes we did without, and it was like, okay, well, we're just going to do without. We don't always have to do without. Yeah, we got to be tough, and we got to be hardy, but we don't always have to do without, not especially when it's right there. So I'm trying to think of then the business area. If I can get that, I'll get the online portal, and that's going to be difficult. And I know that, but he's had 4 years to do it. So we got to go back and look at that. So that would be an accomplishment also. All aspects of I'm just thinking, I'm going around my head. I think, doing a pilot, but you wanted to know specifically what would be more tangible, even more than just like a pilot, and more than testing something. So
yeah, I think so. And I think your answers are valid and helpful. I mean, the point of the question is there's just so much in elections that gets said, and I'm not throwing garbage at anybody, just so much is said. And I think it's easy for voters to sometimes go, Well, okay, but what can we hold on to that's going to be done? And I think you've done a good job of covering what you feel is important when you get in there. And obviously, all plans, the first casualty of war is the plan, right? Is the battle plan. So you get in there, there'll be all kinds of new things. I get all that, and it makes sense. And I appreciate you covering that for us. Let me ask you this kind of, one of our concepts here is you get the last word. So really, I'll give you, what is it you'd like to tell the voters of West Virginia, certainly of the Tigard Valley, but West Virginia at large? What is it you'd like to leave the voters with as we close tonight?
Wow. I kind of like talking all throughout. I hope you picked up something of what I'll do, and just my energy, my passion, my innovation. And I will not let us sit on the sidelines. Yes, there's sometimes like I know what it's like to be put on the sideline and be told to be quiet. So I get that too. At the same time, we should, if we've learned anything in COVID, it's like we have to seize the moment because we don't know what the moment's going to be later on. And I think a perfect example of this is, as soon as these high school sports teams were able to get on the field, like the first game, do you know what they had? They had senior night. And it's not, I mean, it's just, I'm still like, that's so awesome. That's so smart because you don't know if they're going to play the next game. And usually senior night's the last game of the season, right? So I'm like, see, we are seizing the moment. And I think that's what COVID has taught us. Like we always think like, oh, they'll be next year. Well, guess what? There was no next year prom for my daughter. There was no final theatrical performance for my daughter. And so that's the way that we have to look. Like, don't be so much of a renegade and risk, but seize the moment, like seize the moment in automatic voter registration and just implement. Just do it. Do your due diligence and implement it. And we had done due diligence because it's the same concept of online voter registration. So that's what I mean. And that's what you get. Like that's what you will get when you vote for me for Secretary of State. You won't get someone who's sitting back like, no, can't do this. Oh, no, it's, I'm going to give you my stale and stagnant. You talked about campaigns and how people are running for office, and it's the same old fear tactic. Like he wants to fear you into voting for him. I want to inspire you. I want to inspire you with what I've done. And I want you to, yes, we can dream. I mean, I get this because of, growing up on a farm. How much were we allowed to dream? But we can dream of innovation. We can dream of different jobs. I mean, Alex, you're doing this. We should take it. We should take, don't listen. If you don't want to listen to Natalie, listen to Alex. Listen to what he's doing as an entrepreneur. Listen to North Central West Virginia. I mean, this is where I grew up, and I look around and, there's a reason that you're doing stuff in Grafton. You believe in Taylor County, and sometimes old Grafton, I used to cover Grafton as a television reporter and, come to some of those meetings and city council meetings, but you believe in it. And isn't Grafton a beautiful town? I mean, look at what it has to offer, and look what Anna Jarvis believed in 100 and some years ago. I mean, that's the thing. And that's why I'm running. And that's what I'm hopeful that someone will see in me is that she's not giving up on us, that we deserve to have forward thinking. We deserve to, really try things. And the thing is, you're going to fail. I mean, we fail all the time, but that's how we build ourselves up. I always used to use this quote from Roger Babeson: neither success nor failure is ever final. And that's pretty powerful. I mean, it keeps you humble when you're succeeding, and it gives you inspiration when you've fallen down. And so that's what I'm asking folks to do. Like, believe in yourself. I believe in you. If you're having troubles believing that we can do something, yeah, like, you use Natalie for some inspiration. I'll be brave again. This is what I say all the time. I'll be brave so West Virginia can be bold. And I know what that means, and I've put that into practice. Online voter registration is a perfect example when people said we couldn't have it and we shouldn't do it. I had to be brave. And so that's why I'm running again, and that's what I'm asking folks to think about. And most importantly, we didn't even talk about this, the character of the office and the character of the two people running: decency and dignity. I did not fire 16 people and cost our state $4 million with, because of political affiliation or anything like that. That's not what I did, but you can compare that record. So that's what this comes down to, is decency and dignity and what you believe in West Virginians and in the state.
Great. Natalie Tennant, running for Secretary of State. Natalie, thanks for coming on the program and good luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to everyone.
Great. And all of you at home that are watching now, thank you for your participation. And those that are watching this recorded, thank you. And as I always say, you are the magic that makes this representative republic work. So I appreciate you taking some time. Hopefully you found this to be valuable for you in your choices, and get out there and vote informed. Thanks, everyone.